Also following the latest developments out of Stockton, and tonight we're learning more about the 4 young people murdered in Saturday's mass shooting.
150 people gathered to celebrate innocence. A 2-year-old's birthday party, laughter echoing through a Stockton banquet hall, the scent of frosting thick in the air as hands reached for the cake. Then, in the space of a heartbeat, gunfire shattered everything. Children's shoes abandoned mid-flight. Blood pooling where balloons had floated moments before. For young lives stolen before the candles could even be lit. This isn't just another shooting. This is about what happens when violence finds the most innocent among us, and the questions we're left with when the shooters vanish into the night. Before we dive deep into this tragedy, if you're passionate about true crime and want to stay updated on cases that matter, hit that like button, subscribe to One Crime at a Time, and click the bell icon so you never miss a story that needs to be told. Let me take you back to Saturday evening, November 30th, 2025. It's around 6 o'clock in North Stockton, California, in an unincorporated area where Lucille Avenue meets Thornton Road. Inside a local banquet hall, families have come together for something pure and simple, a little girl's 2nd birthday. Think about that for a moment. 2 years old. An age of wonder, of discovering the world, of joy in the smallest things. There are between 100 and 150 guests packed into this space. Grandparents, parents, cousins, friends, children running around with that boundless energy kids have at parties. The cake is ready. Decorations cover the walls. It's supposed to be a memory they'd cherish forever. And it would be, just not in any way they could have imagined. Among the crowd is 14-year-old Amari Peterson, a kid who had everything ahead of him. This wasn't just any teenager. Amari carried a 3.8 GPA while playing basketball, football, and running track. The kind of young man teachers love and coaches depend on. He's there with his father, Patrick Peterson, who's keeping an eye on his kids like any protective parent does. Also in attendance is 8-year-old Maya Lupian, a 3rd grader whose mother works for the Stockton Unified School District. People who knew Maya described her as the most outgoing 8-year-old you'd ever meet, the kind of kid who lights up a room just by walking in. There's another 9-year-old child there too, whose name has been kept private out of respect for the family. And then there's Susano Archuleta, 21 years old, young and full of life. These are just 4 of the many people gathered, but their names matter because in a few moments, they'll matter to all of us. Patrick Peterson later told investigators that his son Amari had just walked over to meet a rapper who was at the gathering. It was that kind of party, multi-generational, bringing together different corners of the community. The cake is being prepared for cutting. You can almost feel the anticipation in that room, can't you? The birthday girl is about to have her moment. Cameras are probably ready. Parents are calling kids to gather around. The great-grandmother, Teresa Spivey, is nearby, making sure everything goes smoothly. Then it happens. The first gunshot cracks through the celebration like thunder in a clear sky. Then another. And another. Patrick Peterson hears the shots and then, horror of horrors, sees a lone gunman wearing a face mask entering the hall, firing repeatedly in the direction where his son had just gone. The shooter appears to be aiming for that rapper Amari had walked over to meet, but bullets don't care about intentions. They tear through the crowd indiscriminately. All at once, that banquet hall transforms from celebration to chaos. Teresa Spivey would later describe what she experienced with raw clarity. All they heard were gunshots. Someone had just walked in and started shooting, and everyone fell to the ground. Babies falling. Everyone running. Can you imagine being in that space? The cognitive dissonance of hearing what your brain tells you can't possibly be gunfire at a child's birthday party, then realizing with absolute terror that it is? Patrick Peterson's eyes find his son in the mayhem. Amari is on the floor, crawling, shot above the heart. A father's worst nightmare playing out in real time. Patrick rushes to him, dropping to his knees, beginning CPR on his own child while gunfire still echoes around them. He's trying to breathe life back into his boy, trying to will him to stay, but some wounds are beyond a father's love to heal. Amari Peterson would die from his injuries, his promising life cut short at 14 years old. But Patrick's nightmare isn't over. His young daughter has also been hit, grazed by a bullet in the pandemonium. She'll survive physically, but what does a child carry with them after witnessing their brother die at a birthday party? Meanwhile, others are fighting for survival in whatever way they can. Teresa Spivey, showing the kind of courage that emerges in crisis, pushes a table over to use as a shield. She's getting children to safety, herding them into a nearby room while bullets fly. Susano Archuleta, that 21-year-old, isn't thinking about himself. Witnesses later reported that he rushed to protect children and his girlfriend, getting them inside a closet to hide when the gunfire began. It's the last heroic act of his life. Susano wouldn't make it out of that hall alive. Neither would Maya Lupian, that outgoing 8-year-old third grader. Nor would the 9-year-old whose name we don't know, but whose absence will echo through their family forever. For lives ended. For futures erased. At a 2-year-old's birthday party. And here's something that makes this even more chilling. The shooting didn't last seconds. A neighbor, Brandon Hernandez, living near the banquet hall, said the gunfire continued for at least 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's an eternity when bullets are flying. At least 10 rounds hit his home, 3 of them tearing through his bedroom walls, missing him and his dog by mere inches. He was just trying to exist in his own space, and the violence of that hall spilled over into his sanctuary too. When the guns finally fell silent, the scene inside was apocalyptic. Video footage that the family later shared with local news outlet Stocktonia shows the aftermath in brutal detail. Folding chairs collapsed everywhere. Balloons that had been inflated with hope now deflated on the floor. Cans of soda and plastic sippy cups scattered like debris after a storm. Children's shoes abandoned where tiny feet had run for their lives. And blood. Blood staining walls that had been decorated for celebration. 13 others were injured in various degrees of severity, ranging in age from 8 years old to approximately 30. At least one person remained in critical condition days after the shooting. And here's something that troubled investigators even more. 2 additional victims didn't come forward until Monday night, 2 days after the shooting. They'd been grazed by bullets but left the scene without speaking to law enforcement, self-transporting to a hospital later. This concerned authorities deeply because it meant witnesses to a mass shooting left without providing information that could help catch the shooters. Yes, shooters. Because by this point, investigators had concluded this wasn't a lone gunman scenario. Despite Patrick Peterson seeing one masked shooter, authorities believe multiple shooters were involved in the attack. Weapons were found at the scene, though officials haven't confirmed whether they were used in the attack or belonged to attendees who were armed for protection. This is Stockton, after all, a city where many people feel the need to carry protection. Law enforcement response was massive and immediate. The San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office took the lead since the shooting occurred in unincorporated county land, but they were quickly joined by Stockton Police, Manteca Police, the FBI, and the ATF. Everyone recognized this for what it was, an attack that demanded every available resource. Within hours, 5 people were arrested about 7 miles from the shooting scene on weapons and gang charges. For a brief moment, it seemed like there might be a breakthrough. But authorities made it clear these arrests have not been confirmed to have any connection to the mass shooting itself. Later, 2 men who had attended the party were arrested on parole violations. But again, they're not considered suspects in the shooting. So despite arrests being made in the immediate aftermath, the actual shooters remained free. And as of today, December 3, 2025, they still are. Sheriff Patrick Withrow was direct in his assessment. This was a targeted incident, he said, not random violence. Stockton Mayor Christina Fugazi went further, stating the shooting was likely the result of group gang violence. That rapper Amari had gone to meet, he may have been the intended target, but in trying to kill one person, the shooters destroyed multiple families and traumatized an entire community. The impact rippled outward like shockwaves from an epicenter. The mother of the 8-year-old victim works for Stockton Unified School District, so the district deployed counselors to all 55 schools. Children across Stockton were processing the reality that kids their age had been murdered at a birthday party. Among the injured was Jasmine Delafosse, a prominent community activist who's literally depicted in a mural in downtown Stockton at the corner of South Stanislaus and East Main Streets. Jasmine has dedicated her life to reducing violence and investing in young people in Stockton. Former Mayor Michael Tubbs called her a beacon of light, of love, an example of leadership in the city. She underwent surgery and faces both physical healing and the overwhelming psychological impact of what she witnessed. If someone like Jasmine, who works to prevent exactly this kind of violence, can become a victim of it, what does that say about the depth of the problem? And then there's Patrice Williams, the mother who hosted the party for her daughter's 2nd birthday. Imagine carrying that weight. She spoke out with heartbreaking humility, saying she just really wanted to say sorry to all the mothers out there who lost their kids at her birthday party.
I'm so sorry for everything.
Think about that. She's apologizing for something she had zero control over, zero responsibility for. Yet the guilt sits on her shoulders because it was her celebration where innocence died. She described having just started cutting the birthday cake when the gunshots rang out and everybody dove to the ground. That cake, symbol of celebration and sweetness, left abandoned as people fought for their lives. The financial burden alone of burying a child is crushing, but having to do it because they were murdered at a party? That's a special kind of devastation, which is where an unexpected angel appeared. Burna Boy, the Grammy-winning Afrobeats artist from Nigeria, heard about the tragedy while listening to the Breakfast Club radio show. He was particularly moved by Amari Peterson's story. So he reached out to entertainment executive WAC 100, who connected him with Stockton Vice Mayor Jason Lee, and Burna Boy made an offer. He would personally cover all funeral expenses for the 4 young victims. All of them. When asked why, his response was simple and profound. When I heard about the children murdered in Stockton, my heart broke. No family should ever face this kind of pain alone. Vice Mayor Jason Lee posted on Instagram about the gesture. Burna didn't know these families, but when he heard what happened, he stepped up with compassion. In a city that often feels forgotten, that often struggles with violence and poverty, this international superstar saw their pain and responded with generosity. It doesn't bring the children back, but it removes one burden from families drowning in grief. The community response has been powerful. Multiple GoFundMe campaigns were established. Local nonprofits came together to provide services, counseling, and resources. Governor Gavin Newsom ordered flags at the state capitol to fly at half-staff in honor of the victims. Congressman Josh Harder had conversations with the vice mayor about federal resources for the police department. Everyone wanted to do something, anything, to help. But the community is also demanding more than vigils and prayers. They want action. They want the shooters caught. Authorities are trying, but they're hitting walls. San Joaquin County District Attorney Ron Freitas acknowledged the challenge directly. People are scared, he said. They don't want to come forward. They're fearful of retaliation. It's the age-old problem in communities affected by gang violence, the code of silence born from genuine fear. If you talk, you might be next. So even witnesses to a mass shooting that killed children stay quiet, protecting themselves and their families from potential retribution. To break through that silence, authorities assembled a massive reward. The FBI put up $50,000. Stockton officials added $25,000. The Youth Peace and Justice Foundation contributed another $5,000. That's at least $75,000 for information leading to arrests. Sheriff Withrow had a message for the shooters, wherever they're hiding. Just know that we're coming for you. There's nothing you can do now. We're going to get you and we're going to hold you accountable. Strong words, but as days pass, the shooters remain free, walking streets, breathing air that 4 young people no longer can. Let's talk about what this shooting represents beyond the immediate tragedy. For the survivors, the trauma will last forever. Children who were there will associate birthday parties with death. The sound of balloons popping might trigger panic attacks for years to come. Parents will struggle with survivors' guilt, asking themselves why their child lived when others died. First responders who arrived at that scene, they'll carry those images with them. The juxtaposition of birthday decorations and blood, of children's laughter cut short by gunfire. And somewhere out there, the shooters are living with what they did. Maybe they're sleeping peacefully, unbothered by conscience. Maybe they're haunted every night by the faces of the children they killed. Maybe they justify it to themselves, tell themselves the rapper was the target and the kids were just collateral damage, as if that makes it acceptable. Maybe they're scared, knowing that $75,000 is a powerful motivator for someone to turn them in. Here's what keeps me up at night about this case. This was targeted violence, right? Someone had a problem with someone else, likely gang-related, and decided to handle it with guns. But they chose to do it at a child's birthday party. They walked into a room full of babies, toddlers, children, families, and opened fire. What level of moral bankruptcy does that require? What happens to a person's soul when they can pull a trigger surrounded by innocence and feel justified doing it? And here's another question worth sitting with. Over 100 people were in that hall. Some of them likely know who the shooters are. Some of them might even be related to the shooters. But fear keeps mouths closed. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of society have we created where people would rather let child killers walk free than risk speaking up? What does it say about us that we've normalized this level of violence to the point where witness intimidation is just accepted as how things work? Think about the 2-year-old at the center of all this. She's too young to understand what happened. She'll grow up knowing that 4 people died at her birthday party, including children not much older than she was. How do you carry that? How do you celebrate your birthday ever again knowing that date marks both your life and others' deaths? What do her parents tell her as she gets older and starts asking questions? Amari Peterson's mother said her son was full of life, laughter, the glue to their family. 3.8 GPA. Multi-sport athlete. 14 years old. Think about all the things he'll never do. Never go to prom. Never graduate high school. Never go to college. Never fall in love. Never have children of his own. Never fulfill whatever potential lived inside him. All erased because he walked over to say hello to a rapper at a birthday party. Maya Lupian, that outgoing 8-year-old, she had maybe 60 or 70 more years ahead of her. Decades of experiences, relationships, achievements, just living. Gone. The 9-year-old whose name we don't know had a favorite color, a favorite food, dreams about what they wanted to be when they grew up. We'll never know those details because their story ended before it barely began. Susano Archuleta used his last moments on Earth protecting others. That's heroism in its purest form. At 21, he had his whole adult life ahead of him. But in the moment that mattered, he chose others over himself. His family heard the accounts of his bravery. That's something, I guess. That's a legacy. But it's a legacy that shouldn't exist because he should still be here. So here we are, 3 days after the shooting. For funerals to plan. 13 injured people recovering from physical wounds, while everyone who was there recovers from psychological ones. A community demanding justice. Law enforcement working around the clock. And somewhere, shooters walking around free, carrying the weight of what they've done, or maybe not carrying it at all. What does it say about who we are as a society that this keeps happening? Not just mass shootings in general, but this specific brand of violence where children become targets or collateral damage in conflicts they have nothing to do with. How many more birthday parties have to become crime scenes? How many more parents have to perform CPR on their dying children? How many more communities have to bury babies before we collectively decide enough is enough? And here's something that troubles me deeply. This shooting dominated local news for a few days, but national coverage was minimal. Why? Is it because it happened in Stockton and not a wealthier community? Is it because we've become so desensitized to gun violence that unless the death toll reaches double digits, it doesn't register as significant enough for sustained attention? What does that say about us? I want you to really sit with something for a moment. The FBI has set up a dedicated tip website for this shooting. The sheriff's office has investigators working overtime. The reward money keeps climbing. Someone knows who did this. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. But will they speak? Will fear of retaliation continue to protect murderers of children? And if they do speak up, will it be in time to prevent these shooters from hurting someone else? Because here's the thing about people willing to shoot up a child's birthday party. They've crossed a line most people won't cross. They've demonstrated a capacity for violence that doesn't discriminate or hesitate. If they did this once, what stops them from doing it again? Every day they remain free is another day they could hurt someone else. Another day some other family could receive the worst news of their lives. So what happens now? Where does Stockton go from here? Where do these families go from here? How do you rebuild a sense of safety in a community when children can be murdered at birthday parties? How do you convince young people that there's a future worth investing in when violence can erase that future in seconds? How do you break cycles of gang violence when retaliation breeds more retaliation in an endless spiral of bloodshed? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are genuine challenges that community leaders, law enforcement, educators, parents, and residents have to grapple with every single day. And there are no easy answers. More police? Better community programs? Economic investment? Gun control? All of the above? None of it brings back Amari Maya, the 9-year-old, or Susano. None of it untraumatizes the survivors. But maybe it prevents the next tragedy. Maybe. What haunts me most about this case is the randomness from the victim's perspective. They didn't choose to be involved in gang conflicts. They didn't have beef with anyone. They just showed up to celebrate a child's birthday and got caught in crossfire meant for someone else. That's the cruelty of this kind of violence. It doesn't care about innocence. It doesn't distinguish between targets and bystanders. It just destroys everything in its path. I think about Burna Boy's gesture again. Here's someone who's never been to Stockton, who didn't know any of these families, who has zero connection to this tragedy beyond shared humanity. Yet he heard the story and responded with compassion and generosity. Meanwhile, people who were in that room, who saw everything, remained silent. What does that contrast tell us about where we are as a society? The calls for justice continue. Vigils have been held, candles lit, prayers offered. Social media is filled with demands for the shooters to be caught. But rage and grief don't solve cases. Evidence does. Witness testimony does. Someone breaking the code of silence does. Until that happens, 4 families are stuck in a nightmare with no resolution, no closure, no justice. Just pain and absence and questions that will never have satisfying answers. If you know who murdered children and you stay silent, aren't you, in some way, protecting those murderers? It's an impossible position, I know. You're trying to keep yourself and your family safe. But 4 families will never be whole again because someone decided gang loyalty or personal safety matters more than justice for murdered children. Here we are at the end of this story, except it's not really the end because there's no resolution. The shooters are still out there. The investigation continues. The families grieve. The community tries to heal. And all of us are left with difficult questions about violence, justice, community, and what we're willing to accept as normal. So let me ask you directly. What would you do if you had information about who did this? Would you call the tip line despite the risks? Would you stay silent to protect yourself? There's no judgment here, just honest curiosity about where people draw their lines. And beyond this specific case, what do we do about communities where this level of violence has become almost expected? How do we break cycles that have been generational? How do we value children's lives enough to actually change things rather than just offering thoughts and prayers after each tragedy? Comment your thoughts below. If this story moved you, angered you, made you think, share it with people who need to hear it. Hit that like button so more people see this case and maybe, just maybe, someone with information decides to do the right thing. If you found this case as compelling and heartbreaking as I did, visit the One Crime at a Time channel to watch more stories that need to be told, cases that demand our attention, victims who deserve to be remembered. Because every story matters. Every victim matters. Every quest for justice matters. One crime at a time, we keep their memories alive and keep demanding better from the world around us.